Hello and welcome to the 2009 edition of the Now Newspapers Lake Country Publications Prep Roundtable. We're going to be discussing the 2009 football season, which begins Thursday, and full slate of games on Friday. And with me today is Stephen L. Tietz and Tom Skybosh from Now Newspapers, and J.R. Radcliffe, the sports director at Lake Country Publications. And we're going to start right off the bat. We're going to talk about Homestead, the defending 2008 Division I champions. They've been to the title game 3 years in a row, Steve. You know them well. How high are the expectations, and how unrealistic are the expectations at Homestead right now in terms of making it 4 straight and consecutive titles?
Dave Keel doesn't get caught up, and the coach Dave Keel doesn't get caught up in talking about, whether they can go back to the titles again. He really believes this. He's really sold on the idea of making good people, good players, and making sure they can go advance in the world and making sure they can make their mark in the world in a solid way. Having said that, they have built up they have really built up a juggernaut that can rival our Arrowhead. They're going to be looking at a real stiff rebuilding job, especially on the defensive side of the ball, where they graduated 4 All-Staters, including their entire defensive line. They'll build around All-State linebacker Lucas Speaker, and then they'll have 2 other returnees. But other than that, defensive coordinator Fritz Rauke is going to have his job cut out for them.
Steve, real quick, offensively, who replaces Casey Barnes at quarterback?
It's looking like it's going to be Matt Stern right now. And what will help Matt Stern is that he'll have the luxury of 4 returnees on the offensive line who will make his job a whole lot easier, including returning now all suburban selection Justin Barber.
I know they're a few years away, but real quick, Homestead South, tell me a little bit about Nicolay.
Former Homestead assistant coaches Everett Jenkins and Drake Zortman are leading up the leading up the Nicolay program. Everett was in a co-coaching relationship with the now retired Rob Rinka last year, but now he's fully on his own this time around with Zortman as his offensive coordinator. I talked to Jenkins at length yesterday. He wants to build up the same mentality, the same program, working up through the youth programs and getting the mentality of we don't make excuses, we just find a way to get things done.
Sounds like a program to watch in the future in the upcoming years. JR, the other half of the 2008 championship game, Arrowhead, where do they stand, and are they still the cream of the crop over in the Classic 8?
Well, Arrowhead seems to reload every year regardless of what they lose, what they had the year before. This year they lose 5 of the 6 all-conference defenders that they had last year, but that hardly matters. The year before they lost 7 of 8, including a conference defensive player of the year, went back to the state title game and allowed only about 11 points a game, so they're always retooling. They've got probably one of the most dynamic offensive duos in the state in quarterback Tom Parrish, who committed to the University of Minnesota over the offseason, and then Brian Crook, the running back, who's already made a name for himself in a few state title games with some long touchdown runs. So they're very dynamic offensively. There are some holes to fill defensively, but like I said, it's not a challenge they haven't faced before. And as always, they're going to look to stampede through the Classic 8. They're going to be a team to watch. They could be a team in that state title game for a 4th straight year.
A program to watch in the Classic 8 just because of the new head coach they brought in, former Oak Creek coach Joe Cook over at Pius. I mean, is it too early for that team to have an impact on the Classic 8, or do you think Joe might have turned things around immediately?
Yeah, it doesn't hurt to have a coach like Joe Cook in the fold for a program like Pius, which has had some good athletes through the years. They like to pass the ball. It's tough to say, though. The Classic 8 has really improved across the board. We're going to see teams like Waukesha North. They have the best returning passer and receiver in the conference coming back, so they're going to look to improve. McGuanago is going to want to improve. Catholic Memorial might have the best team they've had in 10 years. They return their entire offensive line, so there's a lot of talent this year in the Classic 8. Pius is gonna have an uphill battle, but who's to say? I mean, they definitely have a good thing going for them now with Joe Cook on board. And another team we cover is Milwaukee, and they're also looking to follow up on an undefeated regular season last year. They're in the Woodland Conference, and I know you know a little bit about the Woodland. It's kind of restructured itself a little bit, going to 2 divisions, adding South Milwaukee, and going to divisions based on enrollment.
Right, the Woodland Conference is the third year, or the third consecutive year, they've had a different conference setup. And this year it's because of the addition of South Milwaukee, which happens to be the biggest school in the conference now at around 1,200 enrollment. What they're doing the black and blue division is what they're calling it. The Woodland, what used to be, well, it used to be the North and South, but now that, like JR said, they're based on enrollment. We have South Milwaukee, Greenfield, Tosa West, Whitnell, Greendale, and Eisenhower in one division, and the rest of the schools, Cudahy, New Berlin West, Pewaukee, Brown Deer, St. Francis, and Thomas More in the other. Some of the coaches I think that I've spoken to are getting a little tired of bouncing around like this. Again, last year they had to switch because Shorewood dropped out of the conference, and the year before that I think was the year Pewaukee was added to the conference. So they've kind of had to juggle things around, and they'd like to get a little bit more stabilization over the next few years. I mean, the way they have it set up this year, Eisenhower and the two New Berlin schools aren't in the same division. They have to play a non-conference game in the first week of the season to play each other. South Milwaukee and Cudahy, one of the longest running rivalries in the state until South Milwaukee left that division. They're not in the same division either, and they play each other in the first game of the season as a non-conference game because they weren't scheduled to play each other. So a lot going on in the Woodland Conference in terms of who's playing who and when they're playing them.
And now South Milwaukee, formerly of the Southeast, Burlington gone as well, so now they're back to an 8-team division. They used to not even be able to play non-conference games because they had to play every team on the schedule, so it's changed in the Southeast as well.
Right, Southeast Conference, like you said, down to 8 teams, and it's, the coaches like it. They have pros and cons for that. I talked to Ken Krause at Muskego last week, and he said, he likes it because now the first 2 games of the year, not that they don't mean anything, but you can play a team, work out some kinks, find out who's starting, and some position battles and that sort of thing. The first 2 games of the year don't mean as much right away. When it was the 10-team division, you played all 9 conference games, and you didn't have a game to kind of see how things were. So Southeast Conference affected by the move of South Milwaukee and Burlington. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, and and then next year we have the possible WIA realignment, so everything could be thrown out the window again. So that's a conversation for another day. Sky Greater Metro Conference, no changes there, in terms of realignment or anything, but we're talking about a lot of the same schools near the top of the pecking order with Marquette and Brookfield Central, I'm assuming, being the top 2 teams again. How would you kind of size up the Greater Metro Conference, and how do you think things are going to fall into place?
Well, it's pretty much, there's the haves and the have-nots. Everybody I talk to, Marquette's the first name you bring up. They have 50 seniors returning, 17 starters. Colin Wire was the top tight end returning for them, and they've got 2 great linebackers in the Trotter brothers. And definitely you got to look at Marquette. You have to look at Marquette. Brookfield Central is going to be interesting. Last year their defense carried them. This year they have like 2 returnees on defense. Offense, they've got 3 guys already committed to Division I scholarships. The running backs are Jeff Lewis, Xavier Whitaker, and then they're going to play them both ways a little bit this year. Bryce Gilbert, just a stud. He was all first team last year. But there's going to be a lot of individual talent that you're going to see there on that end of it. Many of the coaches feel that this is, they're the toughest conference in the state, as they call it. Menominee Falls, John's got just a ton of guys coming back. He's got Max Baduli, the outstanding hurdler. Outstanding hurdler. Max Paskey back at quarterback, and Baduli's like a triple threat. He can split out, he can run. He's a great kick returner on that end of it, and
they've got the all-world kicker and Kyle French.
As well on that end of it. So there's a lot of individual talent out there. Scott Otto, his team could be a little down, but you can never underestimate Scott. With his ball club last year, they averaged, I think they led the league 365 yards a game rushing. Evan Rosa, who's offensive lineman, he's considered one of the top 5 linemen in the state.
Right.
So there's, like I said, a lot of individual talent out there. I think the have-nots are going to be Brookfield East, Wauwatosa East, and West Dallas Central. But talking about individual talent, it's funny. Wauwatosa East, who under 500 last year, had the first team all-conference quarterback in Ethan Harris. So it's definitely divided between the haves and the haves-not, but there's just a ton of Division I individual talent to come out and watch in the GMC.
The fall football season is upon us. It's an exciting time, and check out your local Now newspapers and Lake Country publications for preview stories this week and coverage throughout the season, and go to My Community Now or your Lake Country publication websites for information. throughout the season.